Well, hi everybody, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is episode number 249 of Goulet Q&A. And today I'm going to be talking about the demographics of the average pen enthusiast, the most popular color of pen that we sell, and which pen that I would resurrect from the past if I had my choice, among other things. I had a great family weekend this past weekend, kind of making up for some lost time from when I was traveling so much. I will be traveling more as well, so gotta sneak that family time in there. It's always a balance. This age, my kids are 7 and 9, so trying to balance out being there for them versus having them do activities versus like family time, one-on-one time. I need to travel and do work stuff too. It's a constant balance, and I know a lot of you can understand that tug and pull, but Rachel and I were figuring it out as we go. We talked about that in our personal message this week. It's something that's very much on my mind right now. But anyway, do want to give you a quick heads up. We're going to be taking off Q&A for the next 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I'm actually going to be doing family stuff. My kids are on spring break next week, so we're going to be doing all family stuff next week. So I will not be in the office to shoot Q&A. And then the following week, I'm actually going to be traveling for a work conference, an e-commerce related conference, not anything pen related specifically, but e-commerce related. So anyway, got to keep learning and growing, right? In all areas of business. So that'll be happening. It's kind of back to back, not ideal, but hey, that's what it is. So we're going to take a little pause, take a little break right before we do episode number 250. Truth be told, I had not planned anything big for 250. It's like a nice round number, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should do something. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to be here, so I don't know how I'm going to plan anything. But anyway, that's happening. You might just see me sitting down here in the same shirt in 3 weeks, because I do tend to repeat my shirts a lot. I don't know, I got greatest hits. I like to wear the same shirts. I don't know, what can I say? Okay, so that's happening. We have some exciting stuff that's coming this week. The Pilot 100th Anniversary ink, which I think is on par to come in on Friday, on today when this publishes, but yet I don't know 100% for sure if it's not going to be Friday. It's going to be early next week. But anyway, if you are interested in that, hopefully you're on the email notification. Hopefully you saw our Right Now on Wednesday about that, and you signed up, and then you got the email notification, and you were like, boom, got it, and then you won't get left out, because I think that that ink is going to fly. It's a limited edition ink. It's not going to be around for long. There's 2 different methods of ink that you can participate in. There's a 50 ml bottle of the 100th anniversary ink of each of the 7 colors that match up to the 7 gods of good fortune, which is what the whole 100th anniversary theme was all about. And that comes in the Iroshizuku bottles, 50 ml. It's more expensive because it's a limited edition. It's $30, but it's a different looking box. It's got like a copper kind of tone to it as opposed to its normal silver. Still same nice glass, different ink. They designed new ink for all of these, and they're pretty fancy looking. I like them. So that'll be fun. And then there's an ink set as well of 15 ml sets. I go into more detail on this in Right Now with Drew from Wednesday, but you can see here it's got nice theming there. 100th anniversary. That's pretty cool. It's got one of each color in here, and these adorable little 15 milliliter bottles. So if you wanted to get kind of a sampling, this set is $100, and these I think are not going to be around long. But anyway, so that's happening. We'll have those for a minute. What else we have? So we have, sorry, I have the swabs of the colors too. Why don't I show you those? In no particular necessarily orderly fashion, I'm going to try to hold up all 7 of these swabs if I can. Boom. That gives you somewhat of a sense of the colors. They're pretty well saturated, but they have some decent shading to them as well. Little on the lighter side for most of them. Some of them kind of are similar to some of the colors that are out there, but I think that this one here on my right, all the way on the end, is the most fascinating to me, the Hotisan. So that's that. We also, Pilot related, have new custom 74s, which we've not had new colors in like 5 years. I don't know. It's been a while. But they have a teal and Merlot, which look phenomenal. Particularly the teal, that's my favorite. The Merlot looks really nice too. Little hint of pink to the Merlot as well. So it's not super purpley. It leans a little bit almost towards the magenta side, which I actually kind of dig. Very fashionable colors right now. These are both very in. The turquoise, of course, is very on theme for our Goulet color palette, which I'm totally digging. And I think that one's going to be the stunner. But anyway, both really nice pens. Same nib offerings as the rest of the custom 74s that we have, and it's one of my favorite pens of all time. So it's phenomenal. I think you should get it. If you haven't, if you're considering it anyway, don't buy anything that you don't need. But if you're into, especially kind of more of an entry-level gold nib pen, custom 74 should absolutely be on your list, because that was my first gold nib pen, was custom 74, and I never regretted it. What else we got? Let's see here. I'm kind of bouncing all over the place. I have I can show you this while we're talking about pilots. The 100th anniversary 7 Gods of Good Fortune pens. So there was a set that came out last year. We had one. There were not many of them, 25 worldwide, but they have just come out with the individual pens that are in their own packaging, and I wanted to show you what it looks like. So this is a Bisu. This is one of them. All of the different pens come in this nice wooden box with the theming, Mount Fuji, the sailing, which there's obviously a sailing theme to piloting a ship. You kind of on theme, you see that. Take the top off. It has all kinds of cool documentation in here about the theming, how you use the pen, all that kind of stuff. The individual artists that worked on the particular pen that we got. And Abisu, this is Furuhara Shutaku, who worked on this particular pen. Set this stuff aside. It comes with this really cool pamphlet that gives you really nice information about each of the pens, shows you all of the 7 pens and all of the different gods and the different good fortunes that they are typically known for. Ebisu is the known for bringing good fortune to businesses. So that's kind of cool. I might just like let this one hang around my office a little bit longer, you know what I mean? But anyway, so you look inside the actual package here. Very nice kind of theming. It's got a nice cloth that comes with it. It has a pen roll or pen wrap. It's got the pen itself. It has a 50 ml bottle of the ink that coincides with the pen. And then you lift up this little placard here, and it has this little hidden gem inside, which is a small wooden box that is meant to hold your cartridges. How cool is that, right? It's got a little magnetic clip. Anyway, so that's kind of cool. It's just like hiding under there. You wouldn't necessarily know it was even there unless you found it. And then, of course, the pen itself is very, very detailed. Now, these pens are just a little bit different than the ones that were in the 25 numbered sets that came out last year. Those were ring top pens that had no clip. These ones have a clip, so I guess technically it interrupts the picture a little bit. They did ring tops before, so it didn't interrupt the picture on the pen at all. But these ones are clipped pens, so I guess somewhat more practical as an everyday carry type of thing. These pens are $4,800 for the whole package. Again, limited edition. There's only so many of them. I don't remember exactly how many. It's more than there were in the sets. But this one is number 2, just in case you were curious about that. But really, really incredible artistry. I'll go ahead and show you a close-up here. Incredible, incredible craftsmanship. I mean, Namiki pens are some of the absolutely nicest looking pens I've seen. I've seen a bunch of different Urushi pens that are out there, and Namiki does it the best. So I know technically it's Pilot, and Namiki, they're both the same, but these are Namiki pens. This is the Yukari style flat top. But that is what you're going to see on the 100th anniversary pen. So very cool. And Ebisu, this is the one that the god actually originated from Japan. Some of them are from China and elsewhere in Asia, but that's the idea there. And then, kind of keeping with the really, really nice pen theme, we also got in this week the Visconti Il Magnifico Serpentine. So we had the red Il Magnifico before this one. We're going now from Japan on over to Italy. Very much this kind of Florentine style. This what was that period called? Not the Enlightenment. Oh my gosh! Come on! Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Renaissance. There it is, Renaissance styling. And this pen is so cool. Not practical for everybody, but it looks just so gorgeous. It's a fantastic looking pen. This one is green marbling. Like, this is exactly the kind of marbling that you're going to see on the Duomo in Italy. So this is very much styled in that fashion. Sterling silver here. It's a heavy pen, but it looks gorgeous, and I'm a big fan. So one thing I will point out on this one, you know, it looks like, and it's in the enameling up here, that it looks like it's missing spots because it's got like white in with the green, but that's actually meant to kind of emulate the marbling. So, you know, as I saw that, I was like, what is that all about? And I was like, oh, that's intentional. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the enameling. It was a stylistic element that they did with that. So anyway, beautiful pen. We'll have those for, you know, a minute, because I think we're the first ones, the red ones, are going to be on their way out, and the green ones are coming on their way in. I don't know if they're going to do more. That would be cool if they did more. If there's other colors of marble out there, that'd be pretty rad. And then a couple other pens that we have here. Moving on over to Germany now. We're just traveling about the world with our pens today. We have the Kaweco Lilliput, which we've only had in the fire blue so far, but this one is copper. Which the cool thing about this is it's going to patina over time as you use it. Now, from what I understand, there is like a light coating on here, so it's meant to slow down the patina process a little bit. It's not like you touch it and 2 days later patinas, but it will over time patina with your hand oils and things like that. So very cool. I dig that aspect of it. It's a tiny little pen. I mean, in my hand, it almost looks like a practical joke, but it's a cool little pen, and especially if you just want to throw it in your pocket, carry it around. It's super, super practical. Because it's so small, it's cartridge only, and so it's very small to try to use without the cap on the back, but the cap screws on, so it's a very sturdy post. But there you go. It gets to be a pretty decent size once you put that cap on there. If I don't have the cap on, I can't really do a whole lot with it because it's like, you know, I completely lose control. I almost have to like use it like this, like when you have a pencil and it's like halfway gone, or it feels like a golf pencil. That's about the size of it. So standard international cartridges there. Did find out these use JoWo nibs, so that's pretty cool. In fact, the only Kawecos that I think we carry that don't use JoWo nibs, that are still using Bach, are the calligraphy nibs, which I don't really think we have those anyway. Then we also, this is new to us, this is the Kaweco Supra. Which I think of the Toyota Supra because the original Fast and Furious, you know, there's that in there. But anyway, not related to that at all. But what's really cool about this pen, it's styled very much like the Lilliput. But the cool thing about this, first off, it has a number 6 nib, so that's cool. Larger nib, always better. And it's a bigger pen, so for somebody with bigger hands like me, it's just going to be a little more practical. What's also cool is it's kind of convertible a little bit. So you got the longer pen, but you can actually, if you want to, you can remove this middle section of the pen. So it just unscrews like this, and you can actually make the pen shorter if you so desire. So if you truly want to have more of a pocket pen style, oh, I got the cartridge in there, hang on, there we go. So if you want to screw it together like this is solid brass, so it's pretty decent heft. So you can actually take out that middle section and you can end up with a shorter pen, and it's actually just about the same length as the Lilliput, but of course the diameter is quite a bit bigger, so you end up dealing with that. But very handy. And when you have that middle section in there, you can use a full-size standard international converter, which is pretty nice. So you have the option to have somewhat more practical desk pen. You know, it's big enough with the middle section in there to be able to write with it, me without posting it, and it's kind of heavy, so you don't necessarily need to post it anyway. If you post it on the back, okay, it's a little long, but it's still workable. It's not like an unusable pen, so you got options there. But it's kind of neat. It's just, you don't see a lot of pens like this. I've been using a Traveler's pen for a while, and it's small, and I just kind of keep it in my pocket, toss it around. So you can see here, you know, this is another brass pen. Granted, it's from a different company, different side of the world, actually. You can see here just the difference between a brand new shiny brass pen and one that has been carried around a little bit. There you go. You can kind of see, granted, there's like fingerprints and stuff on it, but it gets kind of more of a yellowy gold kind of color. Gets darker over time as you handle it. But it's cool. Both brass and copper are going to patina like that over time. I find that copper patinas more than brass does typically. But that's pretty neat, right? So we've got those right now on our site. You can check them out. I believe for $125, I think is what they are for. So they're a little on the more expensive side, but they're solid brass. They're gonna be durable as heck. Really great, it's kind of solid pen to carry around. And then the last thing I have here to mention that I have a sample of in person at least are the Field Notes mile markers. So Field Notes comes out with these seasonal notebooks. They're pretty fun. They're pretty decently fountain pen friendly. They're not like Clairefontaine quality, but they're, their theming is really what's on point here. And they come out with a different theme every quarter. And this one is road signs. So it's pretty cool. They call it mile marker. I mean, it literally looks like road signs. They even went down to like having the, I don't know if I can catch it in the light right here, but you can see they have like the shiny kind of, reflective material in the border. So it's got their like reflective material in there. It looks very Americana. It's pretty cool. It doesn't really have any other like hidden gems in here necessarily. It's pretty much just the theming of the notebook covers itself. But I think if you need to have a like a log that you keep for your mileage, or if you're working on your car and you keep track of when you change your oil and stuff like that, this will be a very fitting notebook to kind of keep in your car, very road themed. It's kind of fun. A couple other things that we got, and then I'll get to the questions for the week. Pelikan Edelstein Star Ruby ink has come in this week, so that's pretty exciting. It's actually a little more magenta in color than I was initially thinking. It's not like this real weak red. It's actually pretty vibrant, so I'm kind of digging that. Then we have 4 new Robert Oster colors: Bishop to King, Black is Black, Schwartz Rose, and Barossa Gilt. So if you're interested in any of those, you can check those out on our site. I don't have anything there to show you, but good thing we have a website, right? Okay, so I got 7 questions for you this week. We're gonna see if I can get through all these and not kill the battery. So let's do it. Starting out with pen and writing questions. This is from Inkskine on Instagram. Who is the average fountain pen enthusiast? And how would your description of a pen nerd today differ from one 10 years ago? Before I answer either of your 2 questions, I had a debate yesterday with Drew about what's the difference between a geek and a nerd. And it was really funny because both he and I thought the exact opposite of each other. But seeing as how Drew probably lives more in that world than I do, I would trust his interpretation of it. He says nerd is more of a trendy term these days. But anyway, so nerd. So yeah, I'll take this pen nerd thing as a compliment. And I think I would probably fit into this category, right? Average fountain pen enthusiast. So I think there's a lot of assumptions to be made here because there's honestly just such a spread of people that are into fountain pens. It's not like it's any one particular group, one particular demographic, one particular geographic location or anything like that. It's really all over the place. I'll give you my best guess, but there's not like a formal research or organization that puts out information on, hey, these are fountain pen people and these are all the breakdowns of who they are and what they like and all this kind of thing. Even as as our business has grown and I've tried to get a more formal, kind of official understanding, we've always had a very grassroots understanding of kind of who the pen community is, very diverse group. But even trying to understand through more formal official business reports and stuff like that, there's just no reporting information on fountain pen users. It kind of gets lumped into office supplies or luxury gift or pen, luxury pen type thing, and it's are fountain pens really luxury pens? I guess it kind of gets lumped into that, but then you're kind of thrown into the Cartier and Mont Blanc and all that kind of stuff, and I'm like, that doesn't really nail it for most of the core of what I think we would consider to be the hardcore pen using community. For me, I think I'm just going to give my assessment based on kind of some of the analytics that we have based on our audiences on different channels, or which are all kind of conglomerated and generalized. No specific identifying information towards any one individual, but there's some Google Analytics type information and stuff on YouTube about generally how old are people that watch our videos and this type of thing. So I have somewhat of an idea, but nothing super exactly targeted. I think most people so there's some kind of formal information, and then there's also just very qualitative information we have just from being in the community, observing, going to pen shows, talking to our customers, being on our social channels and stuff like that, and kind of assessing from there. So I'm just gonna kind of mash all of that stuff together with no real formality to it and just kind of give you my assessment, right? So most of it is working professionals, I think, generally speaking. Most often, probably higher educated, or have completed some sort of formal education. I think there's kind of a bell curve in terms of the age, at least of our customers, that kind of the peak of the bell curve is like 25 to 45 years old. That's kind of, especially being like the working professionals, that's kind of like the peak of kind of who's in that. Certainly there are plenty of people who are, maybe older and, have been introduced into fountain pens, a long time ago. But there's people that are certainly like much, much older that used fountain pens, 40, 50 years ago when they were in school. But I wouldn't necessarily say that all of them are fountain pen enthusiasts to this day, right? Like certainly it's stuck with some people and they're still kind of into it and stuff like that and they have more familiarity with it. But it's definitely not like, okay, everybody who's over a certain age is a fountain pen enthusiast because they grew up with it in school. A lot of people have just abandoned it and haven't touched a fountain pen in 40 years. I wouldn't put them into the group of fountain pen enthusiasts. Yes, definitely there are some people who are more experienced in life that had exposure to it younger. But I think, because we focus so much on social media, internet-based stuff, education, we really try to draw a lot of new people into the hobby. That probably is going to skew it a little on the younger side. I am 34 years old, so I'm kind of like right in the middle of the bell curve there, myself, being a working professional. So I think I would probably represent and I probably attract more people, kind of similar to my own lifestyle demographic, stuff like that. I wouldn't imagine that is too far of a stretch. So there you go. I think geographically, very dispersed, kind of all over the place, tend to maybe congregate more in metropolitan areas, but that might just be because they're more populated areas anyway. It really is just all over the place. I know plenty of people who live in the middle of nowhere in Kansas that are huge fans, and then there's plenty of people who live in apartments in New York City and Los Angeles and these types of things. Of course, these are all generalizations, but that's kind of some of my assessment. So I think to hit on the second part of your question, how would your description of a pen nerd today differ from one 10 years ago? The biggest change I think that's happened is you get people who are younger, certainly, because it's not necessarily just people who grew up with them in school or just people who kind of have pens as maybe a status thing, so that like not people who are like further along in their career and can afford that Mont Blanc pen, whatever, because that was for a while there, that was like the sign of being, having made it kind of thing. I think now you're seeing a lot of people who, stumble across YouTube videos or on Instagram or blogs or whatever it might be, who are getting introduced to them at a younger age than maybe has happened in the last 10 years ago. For sure, I think that has definitely skewed the age younger, especially if you've gone to pen shows regularly. You go now, because I've actually been going to pen shows now for 10 years, seeing the difference in age demographic between people going to shows now versus 10 years ago, definitely way younger, which is awesome to see. And then I think another big difference too is people that are actually writing with and using their pens as opposed to just buying and collecting. So it's not just, hey, there's a limited edition pen, I'm going to buy it, hold it as an investment, or just collect it because I like it. There's just still plenty of that going on, but there's a lot of people that are, inking up and using their pens regularly. That I think is far more common. The people who are just hardcore pen users have come on the rise in the last 10 years. So that's been my kind of casual observation about them all. Maybe you disagree, maybe you don't, and it may be different. Another retailer may have a different perspective on it based on kind of the way they do things or who gets attracted to different businesses and stuff like that. But this is very much coming from like my brain specifically, kind of from everything I've taken in and some of that. So it's kind of interesting. All right, next question is from Brendel.spin to rinse on Instagram. Wood versus celluloid Which one will stand the test of best material for most popular fountain pen and why? Of the two, I have maybe an answer. Honestly, neither of these is the best material for fountain pens, and I'll get into that because I know there's some people who love both. Probably more people that love celluloid than wood. So spoiler alert, I think celluloid is probably the better of the two materials for pens, but neither of them is really 100% optimal, and I'm going to explain why. So I love wood. I'm a woodworker. Making pens out of wood was my original passion that got me into the pen business. So it kind of, I die a little bit inside to say that wood is not the best material for pens, but I reconciled those emotions a long time ago because I realized that that was not the case. Or sorry, that was the case, that they're not the best material, and that I would just have to come to terms with that. So I laid that to rest 10 years ago. Certainly you can have nice pens out of wood, and there is a specific kind of like romance and artistry and feel that you get with wood, that warmth, the natural nature of it, the craftsmanship that's required to make pens out of wood. I love that, but that doesn't make it the best material for wood or for pens because wood's a natural material, and it so that means you have to kind of work within its boundaries. And even as a woodworker, you look at furniture and a lot of the way that furniture is designed, a lot of it is built a very specific way in order to accommodate the strength of the wood in certain directions, the way you join pieces of wood when you build things like furniture. You do it in such a way so that the wood basically doesn't tear itself apart over time. And the way you do certain joinery and you lay out the grain in certain directions is because wood will absorb and contract. It'll absorb and release moisture long after it's cut down. So even just like in an area like this, we're in central Virginia, it gets very humid. So in the summertime, everything swells. It's made out of wood. And in the wintertime, everything contracts. So literally you can see like, when you have like a wood frame on your door, the joint will like split apart and you'll see a huge crack at the joint in the wintertime. And then in the summertime, it's right back there. So that's fine when you build things to accommodate for that, but on a pen, when it's round and the wood is not sturdy enough on its own to reinforce in a pen, you have to have like a brass tube or some other method of reinforcement in there most of the time, unless you design a pen a very specific way. The challenge is you end up, having to deal with that wood absorbing and stuff like that. And then there's 50 different thousand species of wood, and all of them have different properties in terms of density, in terms of how well they will adhere to glues and finishes and these types of things, how much they'll absorb moisture, how much they'll move when they do absorb moisture. So there's a lot of wood pens that are just not going to hold up over time. So it's certain woods that you have to know can be used and also can't be used in that type of scenario. So there's a lot to be taken into account. But boy, is it pretty. I really love the look of wood pens. But you can't just be like, yep, okay, we're just going to throw some wood in a circle. Just turn it on a lathe, drill a hole in it, stick a nib on it, and there's your fountain pen. Yeah, it's got to be a little more thoughtful than that. That's why most wooden pens are so expensive too. It's going to ding, it's going to scratch. There's a lot of stuff. It's kind of a delicate material in terms of, compared to a lot of the more modern, synthetics and stuff like that you see today. Celluloid. Let's talk about celluloid a little bit. So I bashed on the wood pretty good. Celluloid is not perfect either. So celluloid originally was developed in the late 1800s as an alternative to ivory, tortoiseshell, and horn. So it was considered like a modern, more synthetic, even though it's still a kind of a natural material. It's a more synthesized version of like, you're not like, having to, harvest it from an animal, at least. It's more chemically derived, but it's very flammable, and it takes 2 years or so to cure fully, and it's just a very challenging material to work with. Now the end result is you can make some gorgeous materials out of celluloid, and it's going to be much more shock resistant and scratch resistant than a natural material would be, like ivory or wood or something like that. But the challenge is with today is nobody's really making celluloid for pens. Like there's just not that many applications for celluloid in general. In fact, the biggest use of modern celluloid today is ping pong balls. that's pure celluloid, and that's kind of like the only thing today that they're like, yep, this is still total celluloid, and that's the best material for it. So yeah, if you've ever seen any YouTube videos where people light a ping pong ball on fire, yeah, it'll go. But anyway, it's more flammable in its construction state, like as it's curing and stuff like that. In fact, there have been pen companies in the past that have like lost warehouses and lost factory, wings because of flammable stuff that has happened in the celluloid making process. So there's a high risk factor. There's a lot of environmental things, regulations and stuff like that. So in fact, I actually just heard, within the last year or two, there were some Italian celluloids. If you've seen a lot of celluloid come from brands in the past like Omos, Stipula, Montegrappa, Aurora, these types of things. You've seen celluloids coming from some of these Italian brands. You're going to see less and less of that. Delta, these brands. You're going to see less and less of that now because basically they've stopped making celluloid, especially in Italy and lots of parts of the EU due to environmental regulations and risks of flammability and stuff like that. So a lot of what you're seeing with celluloid now is stuff that has been made and is just kind of stockpiled away in these pen companies, vaults, and then they'll pull it out, do a special edition, limited edition thing. It's probably only going to increase in price over time because there's just not celluloid being made anymore. So it's something kind of special. I think what's going to happen eventually is you're going to get so many new people that come into the fountain pen world. They're just not going to be aware of celluloid, and they're going to look and they're going to see celluloid pens for $3,000 and $4,000. And they're going to be like, "What's the big deal?" So you're going to have collectors that really want and have pined for celluloid that are eventually going to finally just like, yeah, okay, I want to get that limited edition pen that's got celluloid. Now I have a celluloid pen, but by no means is it going to be like commonplace to have celluloid anytime soon. It probably ever again. So kind of a point in history, but really it wasn't. It was like in the 1920s when celluloid started to kind of fall out of fashion for most of it. In fact, celluloid originally was most popular in movie making for film, like the movie film, like reels and stuff like that. That was the main purpose for it. But around the 1920s, cellulose acetate became developed. It was a much safer synthetic alternative to true celluloid. So you're seeing a lot of alternatives to that. And now, of course, it's been, 100 years since then. You're seeing alternatives like thermoplastic, PMMA, polymethyl methacrylate, acrylic acetate, and then, of course, you have like aluminum, brass, stainless steel, these, metals and stuff like that. These are going to be all much more practical, durable, less expensive, less hazardous kind of materials to work in. So these are what you're going to see and what you already see most pens being made out of and what you will see for the foreseeable future. So a little bit of history about both those materials there. Between the two options, I would say celluloid is going to be, generally speaking, the more ideal material for pen making. But really, both of them are now falling more into a romantic, artistic, kind of place rather than that of practicality and being the most ideal for all applications. Cool? All right. Next question is from newatthisig, Instagram. I may have pronounced that wrong. I see many colors of fountain pens at your website. What color fountain pen is the best seller with Goulet pens? And what color is least sold? Least sold is going to be tough because, I think I'll go ahead and start with that. Whites and yellows. Like, I don't know exactly which is the worst. I didn't go through and pull like all records of everything because, that gets very difficult because then you get some color and you're like, well, this is a white and yellow swirl. Is this more white or yellow or what? Or it's got some black in it too. Does that matter? It gets very challenging. And then, of course, you're like, well, this pen was a limited edition. Does that matter? What about price point? Do we measure it based on a revenue or quantity of things sold? Or how does that work? So I'm very much going to generalize here, but there's a lot of ways to slice this up. What I did, because I was preparing for Q&A very late last night, and I didn't want to pull a bunch of reports and stuff like that, so I'm going to give you my best guess assessment. You can actually go to our site, go to gouletpens.com, click up at the top on fountain pens, go to all fountain pens, and then you can just sort pens by popularity. And you can just literally look at, as you're scrolling down the page, see what colors you're seeing more of. That's going to give you the best guess as to what's most popular on our site. So looking at that and kind of just knowing my gut and what's generally selling well, actually the color that sells the best for us is no color at all, a clear demonstrator pen. Now, of course, it's like, okay, what about a TWSBI Eco that's mostly clear, but it has a blue cap or a green cap or a red cap? You know, it's like, okay, how much do you slice that up? I don't know, but clear demonstrator is definitely one of the most popular colors in general that we sell. I think we're probably a little bit skewed there from maybe other retailers, or certainly globally. I know in other parts of the world, demonstrator is not the preferred color or lack thereof. Very much a unique thing to online retailers and us specifically because we're so ink focused. You know, everybody likes bottles of ink and everybody likes to see the ink kind of sloshing around in the pen. That's why demonstrators are so fun. It's because you get to kind of see how they work, and you know, people who kind of fall into our little ecosphere, it's almost like a conversion experience of getting into fountain pens. So usually when you can see the inner workings of the pen, that's going to be a more popular color. You know, you get a custom 74 like this. Yes, it's got a color to it. It's a teal, but you can kind of see through it. You can see the inner workings. You can see the ink sloshing around. That's going to be more popular than if it was a solid teal of the exact same color. Guarantee you, we would sell more than a solid teal. That's just how it's going to work. For us, that's not necessarily the case in other parts of the world, but at least that's how it is with us. Next from a clear demonstrator is going to be black. And usually a matte black. The more black on the pen, the better, especially if it can be like all tricked out, stealthed out, that kind of thing. That's going to be most popular. Think matte black vanishing point, right? All black pen, black nib, everything. I'll keep going just for the next couple because that's all I got. Next after black is actually turquoise, teal, like teal turquoise, that kind of bluish green kind of color. That actually, I think, that hasn't always been the case, but certainly in the last year or maybe 2 years, something like that, that turquoise color has been really up there in popularity. And then is blue, kind of like the royal blue, like my walls here in general, but somewhere in that blue landscape. Some of that might be just because we love blue so much here. I love blue so much. I wear blue all the time. I talk about blue, and we feature a lot of blue things, so that's probably a little bit skewed, but also America's favorite color is blue. They've done studies, you know, I don't know who they is, but they've done studies I've heard at various points in time. And generally speaking, blue is a very popular color in the United States. So we're probably going to be a little bit skewed there too. But anyway, so I think that's about all I wanted to say about that. But yeah, let me know if you're surprised by any of that. You know, some ones that are not as common is like really pale colors like tans, yellows. White, generally speaking, is not super popular, with exception, because it's more prone to staining with ink and stuff like that. So I think people tend to shy away from that a little bit. So that tends to usually not be so great. And then green is really hit or miss. Red is really hit or miss. It gets very difficult to kind of predict those ones. But orange can be really hit or miss too. So anyway, moving on. Jazz to Midnight on Twitter asks, some nibs are curved from tip to feed, some are mostly flat across, and some are large or tiny or odd like the Falcon. What are the differences when writing with them? So I think there's definitely a correlation between nib design and writing feel. But it's not always about the shape necessarily. It's going to be a factor, or even really the size. There's a lot of different things that can go into a nib design and how it's going to feel on the page. You can't really look at a nib just as it is and determine like, oh yeah, I feel like this is going to be smooth and springy and all that kind of stuff, because there's aesthetics to it that can influence it, but then there's other things that could, you know, also influence it as well. Like for example, I can have, you know, a pretty plain looking number 6 size nib that looks very traditional with the tip here, you know, the cutout goes to the wings, and it's got, you know, relatively flat top with curved on the sides. Okay, that's a pretty standard looking fountain pen nib. But you can actually grind it to be thinner on the underside so that it has some flexibility to it. Just looking at it, you would have no idea that that's the case, but you could have flexibility there. You just don't know. So there's, or it could be ground so that the tip is very, very toothy. So it could be a very stiff, very toothy nib, but look exactly the same as a very flexible, smooth nib. And you're not really going to know that unless you look at it under high magnification or until you put the nib to paper. Yes, certainly there are things that impact it. The Falcon, you mentioned that one, that's got kind of a stepped beak, kind of bend in the middle of the nib. That one's kind of unusual. But that beak, the reason that it's there is to actually help it, so it's got kind of this look to it. This is the tip of the nib, and it kind of goes up, whereas most nibs will kind of curve gently down like this. The Falcon kind of goes up like that. And the reason it does that is because it's soft and the tines will kind of spread apart like this, and that curve actually helps to reinforce right where that bend is putting pressure on the nib. That's why they designed it that way. Kind of cool, right? Plus it just kind of fits into the theming of the pen. They really nailed it with that one. Larger nibs, generally speaking, a larger nib, you're going to have more leverage. So, if you think about like using Pelican as an example, their M1000 nib is their biggest one. That's the springiest of the bunch. M800 a little less so. The 600, 400 are going to be much stiffer. All else equal, the longer the nib, the more leverage you're going to have, and the springier it's going to feel. But even still, you could have, a platinum nib, which is a high gold content. They're pretty thick. They're really pretty stiff, and they tend to be a little bit on the toothy side. Whereas you can have a nib like the Pilot Vanishing Point, which is very, very small, but it's actually got, a little bit of spring to it, even though it's super, super tiny, and it's very smooth. So it really depends on a lot of different factors, not just the design, the thickness of the material, how it's ground, all these types of things. Lamy 2000, the nib is about the same size. It sticks out about as much as the Pilot Vanishing Point, but it's really stiff and has a bit of a sweet spot to it. So what are you going to do? Smoothness of the nib has very little to do with the shape. It's more has to do with the grind and the tipping material and how that's prepared. So I wouldn't necessarily concern yourself with nib shape in and of itself when looking at smoothness. But it could affect springiness of the nib, and possibly flow. It's a flexible nib and how the slit is cut and things like that. But you almost need to learn kind of each nib in and of itself before you understand that. And this is one of the things that's a real challenge for us as an online retailer. Is like, all right, we can show you pictures, we can have descriptions, but you can't actually write with the pen and get a sense. I mean, it's a very tactile experience, so sometimes you just don't know whether you like a pen or not until you feel it in your hand. That's why, if we have a return policy that if you ink up the pen, then we have to clean it out and we can't sell it as new and all that, and so we have to do a restocking thing. But if you get a pen and you haven't inked it up and you want to just kind of dry write with it and get a sense for the drag on the page and get a sense for how springy the nib is, you can do that. And if you find that something is offensive to you, you can return it and there's no restocking fee. So anyway, that's one little user hack for us and other online retailers who may be in a similar situation as that. So hopefully that helps answer your question. And now we'll move on to Elizabeth from the blog. Elizabeth asks, when you introduced the Conklin Endura, it was a limited production run, which you would consider extending. I've been shopping for a pen to mark a work-related milestone, and I'm considering the Ebony and Mahogany Enduras. It would help me to make a decision, knowing if this is my last chance with the Endura, since I noticed the out-of-stock button for the Ebony Endura in most nib sizes. I find the wood-turned pens very attractive, and this is by far the best priced one around. However, the Edison Nouveau Premiers in Cranberry and Juniper are also contenders, and I know they won't be around for much longer either. Has GPC made a decision yet to carry the Endura regularly? Okay, so the Endura, I'll go ahead and pull that out so you see which pen that we're talking about. I didn't want to just like push the Endura, though I do love the pen, so it's easy for me to talk about. However, I thought it was fitting too because I had another question in here about wood pens, but also it gave me an opportunity to talk a little bit about how we go about doing some of our exclusives and maybe what you can expect as someone who's looking to get some of these exclusive pens in terms of your own kind of planning and stuff like that. So this is the Endura. So this is the Ebony one with rose gold trim that you're referring to, Elizabeth. So very cool pen, very minimal in its design. This is one where I was actually like, wow, this is actually impressive how simple this is, because me back in the day, I would make pens and I had like metal components on both ends with a brass tube in between, so the wood was like very much surrounded by dissimilar materials. The challenge you have when making wood pens like that is the wood wants to expand and contract at different rates than the metal components. So splitting and cracking is a possibility with all wood pens, no matter the price point. So that is something that has to be very much designed around. But this one, really the only contact that it has with metal is right here. Yes, there are some metal threads here that thread into the wood, but they're pretty loose threads, and I've carried it throughout the winter and it has not been an issue, even when the moisture changes quite a bit. So really the only place to watch out with is kind of like right around here at the collar. And I know we've had some slight cracking issues. We'll make it right if that is a situation. But it's wood, and we knew to expect that. But because so much of the pen is just plain solid wood, the wood can absorb and contract and things like that, and just kind of do its own thing without kind of tearing itself apart. The Conklin Endura, this is a pen that we have as an exclusive at Goulet Pens. Of course, because there's so much wood in my own backstory, we were very excited about the possibility of doing this. It was the most affordable wood pen that we've really seen pretty much anywhere. And we just liked the style and trim options and stuff. However, we never really know how something's going to do. And the way that it works for us when we have an opportunity to do an exclusive, it's not just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'd like to sell 10 pens. Let's have an exclusive. No, like in order to have a production run of pretty much any type of pen, they have something called minimum order quantities. I won't get into what those are because it can vary by manufacturer, and you can negotiate different things. But just understand that there is a minimum order quantity or an MOQ that's required when you're looking to be, with any manufacturer to make pretty much anything, because there are certain economies of scale that just have to happen, and there's certain like fixed costs with designing a pen, with marketing it and coming up with the product codes and UPCs and all that stuff. There's a certain amount of work that has to be done in order to do anything with any pen. So you have to sell a certain number of them or buy a certain number of them from the manufacturer to be able to kind of make it worth everybody's while. So we have to kind of commit to a minimum order quantity. In this case, the minimum order quantity was per pen, per style of wood, if you will. So, we committed to all three because we honestly just didn't know which color was going to sell the best. We thought the ebony probably would, especially with that rose gold trim, which is pretty nice. But we varied up the material. We varied up the trim because we kind of wanted to see which one would do best. And it actually ended up kind of falling exactly like what we thought. So ebony has been the most popular, which is why you're seeing multiple nib sizes of it out of stock, because it's been the most popular. So we bought equal amounts of all three. Ebony is sold the most, mahogany is behind that one, and sandalwood is trailing pretty decently far behind the other two. So what happened is, we started selling them. We have no idea. We knew that it was going to be like a 4-month or so lead time to order more of them. But the challenge we have is we have to order a minimum order quantity. We don't know how they're going to sell. We don't know what the nib breakdown is going to be when they sell. So we can't just like immediately right away place a follow-up order, because if we get it wrong, we've then like doubled up on the wrong stuff and all that kind of thing. So we've got to let it sell for a little bit before we can place another order. But it's hard to know. It's like, okay, here's this new wood pen. We've never really sold anything like this, especially at this price point from a brand like Conklin. How's this going to sell? We don't really know. So we got to give it a little bit of time. We have a kind of a gut instinct, so then we have to place a follow-up order, but there's such a lead time that if we really have something that's popular and we have a bit of a run on it, well, then we sell out. So to make it even more complicated, if it doesn't sell well, then we're not going to follow up with another order, because it's like, well, that one's kind of a dud. Why would we go and place another order and have it for however much longer? Because for us, when we launch new stuff, especially something that's kind of a limited run like this, or special editions, seasonal editions, that kind of thing, there's usually a curve of like when something new comes out, it's really exciting, a bunch of people get it, and then over time more people already have it, and there's other new stuff that comes out, and it's just not as exciting anymore. So there's kind of a nice long tail that happens, and a pen will kind of eventually just kind of peter out. There are certain pens that will maintain a certain level of demand and kind of stay constant and be at a good level to carry it regularly. And that's more common with pens that are available to multiple retailers, because it can kind of spread out. Some retailers will sell it better than others at certain times, and stuff like that. So you'll usually have pens, especially if they're more kind of like standard colors and things that are more universally appealing, you'll have stuff like that that'll carry through and be more popular for longer periods of time. But if you have like an individual retailer that's buying up on something and they have to, kind of sell it and then, can't necessarily carry it for 5 years, and sell it over that long of a time frame, individual retailers usually, try to sell things relatively quickly because we invest a huge amount of money in those and we need to recoup that cash so we can tie it up into the next project, right? So that's just business practices. I'm getting into like some kind of business talk here, but basically, if I just bought like, 50 different limited edition things and tied up all my cash in those limited edition things and had a 2-year lens on recouping all that money, I couldn't carry anything new for the next 2 years, so you got to kind of roll it and stagger it. And there's a whole art form just in doing that in terms of the business side of things. But where that gets complicated for us is we have a minimum order quantity. We got to sell it. Okay, we don't know which color is going to sell the best. So we got to kind of like let it get out there into the marketplace, because sometimes we're just like way off. We have no idea. We generally have an idea, and we look at what sells in other brands and other colors and things like that. But there's seasonality, there's trends, there's maybe like 5 other manufacturers have come out with the exact same color of things, and this is the 5th one to come out, and people are like, yeah, I'm kind of over that. I like this other color now. And it's like you can miss the mark. So you get into kind of like fashion trends and stuff like that too. That's a little bit of an element to it. So there's all these different factors that come into play. So we never really know when we launch something, is it going to sell well? Maybe people hate the pen and it's a total flop and we cancel all of it, we sell out what we originally had and just don't get any more. That's rare that happens, because generally we're conservative enough where we have a pretty good sense that the pen's going to be pretty popular. And we vetted ourselves, we know the products really well, so it's pretty rare that we have a total swing and a miss. But sometimes it happens. Usually it's more like certain colors and stuff where like, oh, that color is just absolutely bombing. And it's like if there's a limited edition and we have like multiple colors, and there's one color that's available for like 6 months, and then we eventually close it out and it just drop the price, that's because it wasn't selling on its own. It's not unlike if you go to the clothing store and you look at the clearance rack and you're like, ugh, like no wonder anybody wanted these. It's kind of the same deal. But they got to close it out, they got to freshen up the inventory, recoup that cash and tie it up into the next project. For us, we had to place another order. This is a very long story, giving you way too much information to tell you that yes, we have reordered the mahogany and the ebony. Is it going to be enough? I don't know. We're going to see. Now we're onto the reorder here. We've had times where it's like we sell out the initial pen and it just, you can't get enough of it. And everybody wants it, and then there's like a 4-month lead time with nothing. We bring all the pens back and it's like crickets. And like hardly anybody buys it. And we're like, what the heck? It's like 4 months ago, everybody wanted this thing, and now all of a sudden it's just not the new hotness anymore, and it doesn't sell at all, even though it's the exact same thing. That happens sometimes. So, but then other times it comes back and it's still really popular. So enough times that happens where we're not able to predict exactly what's going to happen, where we just have to be a little bit conservative, and especially because we're a no-debt company and all that kind of stuff. We're paying everything for ourselves. So we are going to lean a little bit more on the side of, okay, let's not just shotgun it and carry everything and see what sells and whatever, who cares. It's like, no, we have to know that there's a method to the madness and recoup it within a certain amount of time in order to run an intelligent business. So that's how we're doing it. So where are we going with that? So the Ebony and Mahogany Enduras, we are going to get those back. I don't know exactly when, probably at least another month or so, because we did order them. We started carrying them during the holidays, and we ordered them probably about a month after we launched them. So I actually don't have an update yet on when we're getting more, but we have more of those ones on order. We do not have more of the sandalwood on order. Those haven't been as popular. We'll still probably have them. I doubt we're going to run out of them before we get restocked on the other colors. But we don't have any plans to restock sandalwood now unless all of a sudden there's a huge surge and people are just clamoring for the sandalwood, but I don't think it's really going to happen. So yes, the Edison Nouveau Premiers and Cranberry and Juniper, since you mentioned those ones, those are also contenders here, but those ones are not going to be around much longer, that's true. So those you should probably jump on sooner because they're seasonal. We are not making more of those. There are no more on order. It's actually kind of rare that we have any of the seasonals carrying over into the next season. It's only maybe 2 or 3 times that's ever happened even. So that one, I don't know exactly how long they're going to last. You've got probably a few weeks here, maybe, depending on which one, on nib size and stuff like that. But those are definitely going to be gone here soon. So the Ebony and Mahogany, you can wait. So wait on those, and then I would focus on the Premiers if I were you. Cool. I hope you all like this insight. I do get feedback, on my personal Instagram and reading in the comments and stuff like that. Some people are like, shut up about the business stuff. All I want to hear is about pens. Other people are like, pens are fine, but I'm really compelled to hear how you run your business. And other people are like, shut up about all of it. I want to hear about your kids. And other people are like, why would you ever talk about your kids? And so I get a mixture of feedback. But in general, people usually like to see a little bit behind the curtain. So I do like to lift that up every now and then, especially in a Q&A setting when you've got nothing but time while you're cleaning your pens or cooking or, running on your treadmill, whatever it is you're doing while you're watching this. Happy to be on your journey with you. All right, got an ink question here. This is from ealtindisli on okay, sorry. You're on Instagram. I've heard from different retailers and fountain pen enthusiasts that Mont Blanc and Pelikan Edelstein inks have a lubricating component in them to keep the pen somewhat safe. Is there any truth to that? And do different producers add something similar? This is an interesting question to me. There's not really a correlation so much between lubricant and safety in a pen. Personally, I've not really heard that. I think probably where you're getting this messaging is Mont Blanc and Pelikan especially have been 2 companies where I've seen more explicit marketing language or warranty language around their brands where you should use their ink in their pens to maintain the warranty and stuff like that. Or maybe it's like, we can only guarantee, your pen will operate flawlessly if you're using our ink in our pens, that kind of thing. And then maybe somewhere it got thrown out there that there's lubricating properties or something like that, and maybe, you tied the 2 together. I have not heard that, you should use lubricating inks because it's safer for your pen. No, not really so much. And even the idea of safety, that opens up a whole can of worms when you're talking about ink and pens and stuff like that. And I've talked to people deep within the pen world who completely disagree with each other about what makes an ink safe in a pen and what doesn't. I mean, literally using the opposite examples of each other to claim their stance. So I don't know. I get a little confused. All I know is in practicality of what we see as fountain pen retailers and ink retailers with 700 or so different types of ink and a lot of different brands, of which ones are actually unsafe. It's pretty rare. I mean, yes, you can use calligraphy ink and shellac-based ink and stuff like that can really kind of be unsafe in your pens. But if you're using fountain pen ink in a fountain pen, generally speaking, it's pretty safe. I know that'll be up for debate, but there's certain people who claim certain inks, certain brands, whatever it might be, are absolute no-nos and you shouldn't do it, and equally you'll have 10 people that'll completely dispute that, say that that's the only thing they ever use and they've never had a problem, and what do you do with that information? It gets very confusing. As a retailer, I can say I've had very little definitive, consistent evidence to say that pretty much any ink is bad in any specific pen. There's some inks that are harder to clean and stuff like that, but and then the idea of lubrication being tied to that safety, I haven't really seen that necessarily to be the case. Now that said, it doesn't mean that it's unsafe or better or worse or anything. I don't know specifically if Mont Blanc or Pelikan has any better lubricating properties than any other brand ink. In fact, I don't necessarily believe that is the case. It's interesting. Sometimes you'll get pen companies that'll say our ink is water resistant or waterproof or document proof or whatever, and you test it out and you're like, it's okay. but it's not nearly as much as this other brand. So everybody's got kind of a different scale. Everybody's, got different interpretations of how they see it. And safety certainly is, and lubrication is one of those things. In fact, there's only a couple of brands that actually do claim, like there's specifically publicly some sort of demarcation on the packaging to say that there is lubricating properties to the ink. One of them is the Noodler's Eel series. The eel is the additional lubricant. Eels are slippery, so that's the notation there. It's only a handful of ink colors that Noodler's has done there that has those lubricating properties, and those are the Eel series. And then Monteverde has their ITF technology, which they say is additional lubricant, not necessarily for the purpose of safety or even for being smoother in your pen, but for them they do it to extend the amount of time that a pen can be uncapped and still start up properly. So even that is like it's a whole different claim. So yeah, I just don't know if there's any evidence of that claim specifically. Now, I think that there's other brands that are kind of generally known for being a little more on the wet side or on the lubricated side. Pilot Shizuku gets thrown out there a lot. Herbant inks from France. A bunch of different like Diatermentis and some Diamine will get thrown out there too as being pretty wet and lubricated. But I don't have anything definitive to say that they are or not, and what impact that may have on the performance or safety of your pen. So one thing that I've been thinking about for quite a while is thinking about lubrication and how do you measure lubrication in ink, and what impact does that have on flow, and how do you measure that objectively? I've really struggled with this. I've done a lot of ink reviews in my time. I've played with a lot of different pen and ink combinations. Of course, you can feel when there's a difference between a really dry ink, a really wet ink, but it's very, very subjective. And of course, depends on the pen and all these types of things too that can impact it. But I'm very curious. I'm not a scientist. I did okay in science class in school, but once I got to like chemistry and stuff, I was like, a lot of memorization and stuff like that, I was like, I am not a scientist. I'm also not super consistent. I like to experiment and try different things every time. I'm not a great scientist. So it's not the way my brain works. So I've always been intrigued by the idea, like, is there a scientific method or a scientific process that could give some sort of objective, definitive, measurement towards lubrication in ink? Is there like measuring viscosity or flow or something? I don't know. I've casually researched like ways to measure viscosity, and the equipment's like thousands of dollars, and it requires a lot of time and effort and all that. And I'm like, okay, say you measure the viscosity of the ink. Does that actually correlate to how it flows in a pen? I don't really know, and there's just not a lot of research out there. Maybe there is, and I'm just ignorant of it, and I'm not aware. But I figured I would kind of put it out there to you all in the pen community. Do you know of anyone where they've already done this research, and I'm just ignorant of it, and you can point me towards it? Do you know anybody who's a scientist or somebody who may have insights to this? Are you a scientist who may have insights into this? Or like, hey, I have a piece of equipment in my lab where I can measure fountain pen ink viscosity, and that will definitively tell you that this ink is 9.8 on the wetness scale, and this one is a 7.2. I've never had that type of precision in measuring this type of thing, but I do think it would be very helpful information. Look at Colorverse, their ink, they put viscosity on there, and I'm like, they're measuring it somehow, but I don't know how they're measuring it, and of course they're not going to measure other brands of ink, so it's like, I'm very curious to learn, something that I don't know there. So if you are a scientist or know anyone specifically around who could help me around this area, I'm very curious to learn more. Leave a comment or shoot me an email at brian@gouletpens.com, and I'm very curious to learn more about this process, because I've had it on my mind for several years, and I don't have the time to become a scientist and do all the testing myself. Nor do we have scientists on our team here who could do it either. Though, if it is something easily teachable, maybe we could take it on. I don't know. We'll see. So that's that. All right. To close it out this week, I have a personal question. This is from Alpha City Bill on Twitter. Of all the fountain pens of yesteryear, which would you choose to come back? Of course, with a modern flair. For me, the answer is quite simple, and I forgot to grab it. I'll go grab it in a second. It is the Pilot M90. And with a modern flair, I don't think that's necessary. I think that pen was so far ahead of its time, it doesn't need to be changed at all. I think it's perfect just as it is. So I'm going to go grab one and show you. Give me a hot second. This is the beautiful Pilot M90. This was around in the early 90s, I think it was. Mid 90s maybe. I don't know exactly. Beautiful pen. The coolest thing about this pen, I mean, it's a nice pocket pen. Looks very slick. I'm normally not necessarily into all metal pens either, but it's the nib for me. It is this integrated nib with this awesome looking swoopy kind of feed that's in there. It's just the coolest looking thing. I don't know. So I like the pocket penness of it. Snap cap, very easy. It becomes, more of a full-length pen when you snap it onto the back. Very effortless, and I totally dig it. Fits a converter and everything. So this, to me, is the pen that I would bring back. And believe me, I have let Pilot know that they should bring this back. The other one that I'll give an honorable mention to is the Parker 51. Big fan of this. I kind of like hooded nibs. I mean, I love a big, beautiful nib, but I kind of like hooded nibs too. The Parker 51 is probably the most popular pen that has been in history. Super, super popular, but I know it was discontinued for a reason, but I think it's really cool, and I think it would be interesting to bring back. So that's what I would do. With a modern flair, I mean, I would, of course, do some crazy things with the resin. I think you could do a lot with this in terms of modernizing the look of a Parker 51. But still keeping the overall design the same. So I'd be very curious to see what that looks like. So that's all I got. Admittedly, I do not have a super vast knowledge of vintage pens, but those are some of the two of the ones that I respect and love a lot. So my question for you, question of the week, if you will, is if you could resurrect any pen from history, what pen would it be? Basically just re-asking you the exact question that was asked to me. Cool. All right, so you can check out a lot of what I talked about here on gouletpens.com. Subscribe, like, comment if you haven't already. It's going to be a couple of weeks before I see you again, and I'm not going to promise a big shebang for... Shebang? Is that even a thing? Whatever. I'm not going to promise you much of anything for episode 250, just because I'm going to be involved in a lot of other things. But anyway, who knows? We'll see. Maybe just kind of casually, if you could mention like what would be kind of cool to see in episode 250, let me know. So that's all I got for you this week. Thanks so much for watching, and right on.